Before we begin, I want to let everyone know that this is a true story. Not a single detail has been fabricated. During my first year of middle school, I developed a bit of a reputation as a wild child, and I've had several run-ins with our school's resource officer. One day when I was at home watching TV in the living room with my sister, someone rang the doorbell. This startled my younger sister because our parents weren't home. I was the oldest of 4 children, and despite my rebellious nature, I was still the big sister. I wasn't too worried about someone at our door because I figured it was probably the mailman, or one of those annoying solicitors, or perhaps it was our neighbor checking in on us. I went to the door and politely asked, "Who is it?" "Open up. It's the police," a man's voice responded. By the way, our door had no peephole. That's a whole other story. But I could tell there was something off about this man's voice. It seemed cold and detached. I turned to my sister. "I don't know if this guy's really a cop. Go upstairs and go check on Jason and Ashley. I'll handle this." She darted up the stairs. The guy on the other side of the door began asking for somebody by name, claiming that they lived there. "I think you got the wrong place. No one by that name lives here." "Well, I have a warrant that says otherwise. Are you lying to me, young lady?" "No, the guy that you're looking for doesn't live here." "Then who just ran up the stairs?" This immediately creeped me out. There was a long window by the front door. It had one of those thick frost layerings. It wasn't easy to tell who was inside if you were on the outside looking through it. But it didn't look like he was standing in front of the window. So when did he take a look? He would have had to focus real hard to see my sister, because there were no lights on. Furthermore, it was midday, so it should have looked completely dark from where he was. I automatically felt threatened. Whoever this man was had crossed into creep territory. So now I was going to be a jerk. "It was my sister, and she's obviously not the grown man that you're looking for." "Why did she run?" "Because you're a f***ing weirdo." "Excuse me, you don't talk to a police officer like that." The way he said that sounded like he was becoming annoyed, like I should just trust him on his word alone. "Well, if you are a cop, you're not a very good one, because you're at the wrong address. And how do I even know that you are a cop?" "You should just open the door and see for yourself." That's when I saw my sister peeking around the corner at the top of the steps. "Get back," I whispered. We rarely get people at our door when my parents aren't home, but it's not impossible. I had this habit of locking the screen door. It was very strong for a screen door as well. And to clarify, it was one of those screen doors directly outside of the front door. Our front porch was open. I figured I would take the risk and open the door, just to see if this man was really a cop. When I opened up, the man on the porch did look like a cop. His hand was on his gun, and he kept looking behind me as if he was searching for something. His behavior made me trust him even less. He began grilling me about my sister, trying to catch me in a lie. "Okay, so who really ran up those stairs?" "It was my sister. I already told you. How do I know it's your sister and not the person I'm looking for?" "Look, you have the wrong address." The man glared at me through his aviators. It was hard to see his face because of how big they were. It was like he was trying to hide his face. I know it's a silly thought for a kid, but my mom and I watched tons of true crime shows together. I know it was stupid to open the door, but I had this sinking feeling that he knew that we were alone. Up to this point, he did not ask for my parents, not even once. I just wanted to keep him in sight, because I knew my parents would be home soon. The cop explained to me that the man he was looking for lived at our house, and according to his paperwork, this was still his current address. I informed the cop that we had been living here for a few years now, and I knew for a fact the woman before us lived here alone. This frustrated him, and he informed me in a demanding tone that he was going to check the house himself. No you're not. Young lady, you're interfering with police business. Now open up the door before you get in trouble. I'm not stupid. I know that you need special court papers to come inside. I was in a stubborn mood, and nobody wins against me when I'm in a stubborn mood. Unless, of course, you're my parents. Cop or not, this man wasn't coming inside the house, or going anywhere near my siblings. That's when he demanded to speak to my parents for the first time. Where are your parents? I want to speak to them about your behavior. He was trying to use the get me into trouble tactic to frighten me. In reality, my mom was far scarier than him. He would have been afraid of my mom because she's the type to kick someone's ass and then ask questions later. But she doesn't play around when it comes to her kids. She wouldn't assault or threaten a police officer, but he would have been in for it, because my mom would have unleashed a verbal onslaught. Full-blown Karen mode. Level 10. My parents aren't here right now. They're at the grocery store. I had a feeling that he already knew my parents weren't home. Up until then, he hadn't asked for them. I didn't know if he was a cop or not, but I didn't want to aggravate him further by telling him a lie. I know that my behavior was annoying, but I wasn't going to give him a reason to call me a liar. That's when he reached for the screen door and tried to open it. That's when he discovered it was locked. Open the damn door. I said no. I then slammed the door shut so he couldn't ask me again. I snuck halfway up the stairs and listened. He began yanking and tugging on the screen door. Little bitch, I should arrest you and teach you a lesson. After that, he just walked through our neighbor's yard like nothing happened. That's when I realized that I never saw any cop cars in our driveway. We lived in townhomes, so I could see all the vehicles from a distance, and I didn't spot a single cruiser parked nearby. My parents showed up almost right after he left. I told my mom what happened. Well, you shouldn't have opened the door, and you should have called me right away. What's the matter with you? You're grounded. Now come help me with the groceries. I couldn't help but notice that our neighbors checked on us far more often after this incident, and our parents got us a babysitter whenever they left the house without us. I'm not 100% sure, but something tells me that that man who came to the house wasn't a cop, and I would have put my family in danger by allowing him inside. To everyone listening, teach your kids that a uniform is just not enough. You should ask for their badge number and call the police station to verify if you can. It also doesn't hurt to invest in a strong, sturdy screen door.
I'm a 23-year-old male and currently a graduate student at a large university that I want to keep anonymous. To preface this story, I live in a large apartment complex on the 4th story, just a few blocks from campus. And even though the apartment is nice, the area is not. There are lower income projects directly across the street from my apartment, and there are constant police patrols around the area as there are multiple convicted felons living there. I'm very high up from the ground on the 4th floor and far from the stairwell and feel relatively safe until one night. This all happened on the night of my 23rd birthday, and I was coming back to my apartment late. I was pretty tired after all the events and fun that I had, so I just changed out of my clothes and into my boxers and went to sleep. To add more context, I had recently put out a lot of nice small Christmas trees, lights, and decorations, and the whole balcony looked very nice. I could turn the Christmas decor on and off using my computer, so before I went to sleep, I turned off all the lighting. This made my balcony and apartment pitch black. I went to bed and fell asleep pretty quickly. Everything was quiet until all of a sudden I was awoken to a loud noise that sounded like a fence railing rattling. I have a pet rabbit, and she sometimes rattles the fence whenever she wants something. I also have a pet camera in my living room area, so I opened up the app on my phone to see what she wanted. However, when I checked the live footage, my rabbit was fast asleep and far from the fencing. I then thought someone must be out on their balcony and accidentally knocked over a plant or something, so I opened up my bedroom door to see what was going on. However, when I turned my head to look out at my balcony, I was jump scared by a medium-sized man with a backwards baseball hat and camo on. I was in pure shock and immediately went back into my room to call the police. After I knew the police were on their way, I poked my head around the door and yelled at the guy to get the F off my balcony. He didn't seem fazed by this and tried to convince me that he was stuck and to let him in so we could get off of my balcony. However, I wasn't born yesterday, and there was no way I was letting this guy on my balcony into my apartment at 4 in the morning. The guy kept talking and said his name is Charlie, and I just finally had enough and said that he's lucky he's still standing there. This was enough for him to climb down the side rail of my balcony and onto the 3rd floor. Later, I got a call from the police and asked about his description, but as of now, I haven't heard if he got caught. I filed a police report, and they're currently looking for him. The crazy part about this story is that I live on the 4th floor, so I'm over 40 feet up in the air, and there's about a 12-foot gap of open air between the apartment balconies vertically. There's also a 40-foot gap between my balcony and the stairs on each side. Aside from damaging a cheap flag, he did not steal any of my expensive Christmas decorations. I found this very odd that he wasn't on my balcony just to steal my decorations. Since the incident, I happened to run into some people that live in the building. I told them about how the guy tried to break in and enter my apartment, and I probably scared them badly when I told them this. I recommended that they reinforce their doors with something to keep them shut. That night, I installed an extra camera for the balcony and went to sleep. I didn't hear or see anything when I checked my camera the next day. However, someone claimed that the guy came back and tried to break down their door, but couldn't because of the reinforcement. This scared me a lot, because now I knew the person was not there just to steal furniture off balconies. The next night, nothing happened. When I woke up the next day, an idea popped into my head to check the roof area. There's a roof access area in the complex, so I went up and checked it. I didn't see anything at first, but I noticed how one of the planters were pulled out just slightly. This was extremely odd, because you had to look at a specific angle to see that this large planter was pulled out. Also, I go up there fairly frequently, and it's usually very clean and orderly. When I looked behind the planter, I was completely horrified. I found a large and heavy brick that looked like it weighed 30 pounds behind the planter. For reference, our apartment building is not made of brick, and when I looked at some brick buildings in the area, I noticed that the brick I found was a lot larger and more malformed than the bricks on the buildings. I immediately called the police, and they looked around on the rooftop that night to see if there was any more evidence, but they said they didn't find anything. The officer told me to dispose of the brick, as they wouldn't be able to get fingerprints off of the surface. It's the next day now, and I know that nothing else happened since last night. However, when I checked the rooftop again, I found another brick, but this time, it was hidden in a plant with tall grass. I think he noticed the last brick was gone and went to get another one. I've been really stressed out about this and have not been able to sleep for the past few days. I hope after this time he's given up, but something tells me that he hasn't.
I'm a 23-year-old male. I used to work for Airbnb as one of their contracted employees as their Tier 1 customer service. For those that don't know, Airbnb is a hospitality service where every day people can rent out their homes and apartments either partially or entirely to people as an alternative to renting a hotel. It's a rather nice idea, although it's in a legal gray area because while there are no laws preventing it, there are no laws guaranteeing your rights as a tenant either, as there is with signing a lease or a home mortgage would grant you. If your host decides to cancel your reservation, your contract is considered null and void in our eyes and you must leave the property, or you can be arrested for trespassing if the host wishes to press charges. I had totaled my car when I hit a patch of black ice in a previous snowstorm, slid into a curb, and snapped my front suspension on the left side of my car. So I was forced to take the light rail to work for the time being. Luckily, I live right next to a light rail station, and my work was within 1/4 of a mile from another. I called into the office and told them that I would be late because I had just wrecked my car, and thankfully they understood. I arrived an hour later, and my trainer sat me between two girls who had been chatting away in an attempt to get them to quiet down and pay attention. Needless to say, it didn't really work because the girl to my right, Lily, would just lean forward and talk as if I weren't even there. The girl to my left, Amy, would do the same, and it was hard to pay attention to the instructor. There was another girl there, Susan, sitting to the right of Lily, who would try to join in on the conversations, but was just not very effective, even though she had the most boisterous voice in the room. I'm pretty sure the two girls were just ignoring her mostly, as her comments seemed forced, and you could tell she had no idea what she was talking about, and just came across as pretentious and rude. During our first break, our conversation returned to relationships. Lily was single, but was crushing on our trainer. Amy was engaged, and I was dating a girl whom I had had a crush on since I was 12 and had plans to propose to in the coming months. They both helped me plan out my proposal, things to do and things to avoid, and I'm pretty sure were more excited for me than I was. While we were talking in the front lobby, Susan comes up and hijacks the conversation. "I have a boyfriend too," she said. "He's 28 and has his own house and drives a Mustang." For context, Susan is 20, and I'm not judging her for dating someone 8 years older than her, but the more questions we asked, the more it seemed she just made this guy up. Now, these weren't malicious questions, but genuine questions trying to get a better idea of who she was dating and just trying to be nice. "Well, he's not exactly my boyfriend. He's married, but he says he's just waiting on the divorce papers to finalize, and then I can move in with him." She rattled on. I became more and more uncomfortable with this girl. As she started talking about her boyfriend, she would glance over at me, give me a once-over, and then continue talking as if nothing happened. It made every hair on my body stand on end. I am a firm believer that there has to be some sort of physical attraction between two people for the relationship to work out, and even if I were single, I was not attracted to this girl in any way, shape, or form. After the end of our training day, I started to make my way to the light rail station. There was about 2 feet of snow on the ground, so Amy offered to give me a ride home, as I lived on her way. I greatly appreciated the offer and offered to fill up her gas tank beforehand as payment. Susan jumped in and asked for a ride as well, to the light rail station right by my house. Amy offered to drop her off at the light rail station just up the road, but Susan insisted on being dropped off at the one by my place. I didn't think anything of it at first, but I would be lying if I didn't say that it seemed too much of a coincidence that she wanted to be dropped off right at the one right next to my house, where there was another one so much closer. I was dropped off at my leasing office, as I didn't want anyone to know exactly where I lived, and my roommate and I decided to order pizza instead of going out in the snow, and I wanted to drown my sorrows in something as I had just lost my car. 45 minutes go by as we wait for the pizza. I understood that it would take a little longer to get here as the weather conditions were terrible and whatnot. The pizza arrives, and he hands me something else. A letter, he said, was sitting on our doormat when he arrived. I was intrigued, as we had just moved in not more than a month ago, and hadn't met any of our neighbors yet, so perhaps it was something from them. I wish I hadn't opened it. It was a letter from Susan. The envelope was covered in hearts, and the initials J and S were in one of the hearts with an arrow through it. How did she know what building I lived in, I thought to myself, let alone apartment number? I tore the letter to pieces and threw it away without a second thought. In hindsight, it was a stupid idea, but I wasn't anticipating what would happen next. The next day at work, Susan approached me and asked, "Did you get the present I left for you yesterday?" My only response was, "How did you find out where I lived?" "I used my admin credentials to access your test listing you created yesterday in training. I hope that's okay," she said, trying to act all shy and innocent. It's not. What is wrong with you? I swear to God, if you ever come to my house again, I won't hesitate to call the cops," I shouted back. I was livid. Not only was that a gross invasion of my privacy, she knew I had a girlfriend and had plans to propose soon. 2 weeks went by, and Susan would constantly come up while I was talking with Lily and Amy, insert herself into our conversation, and turn them into conversations about her and her boyfriend and all the kinky sex that they have now that the divorce papers were finalized. I'm not one to judge people's fetishes or sex lives, but I really don't care to hear about all the dirty details, especially at work. Not to mention, our conversations were nothing along the lines to begin with. We would talk about relationships, yeah, but the topic of sex never came up. Susan would constantly message me on Google Hangouts, as that is what we used to get in contact with each other on the production floor, as our phones were not allowed because we have access to our users' personal information. The address, last 4 digits of their credit card or bank account, depending on if they were a host or a guest. so that was our only method of communication while at work. She would send me messages like, "I'm sorry, please forgive me," and "I just really like you and didn't know how to tell you. Can we just start over?" I would ignore these messages, and I eventually ended up blocking her altogether since the messages became much more aggressive as time went on. "Why don't you like me? Is it because I'm fat, isn't it? Why won't you answer me? I'd let you do anything you wanted to me. Just say the word, I'll come over. What's your problem? Any guy would be lucky to have me. And the most disturbing of them all, I'll just tell them you raped me if you won't let me come over tonight." I blocked her after that and went to HR with my complaints. I told HR about her stalking and using her admin privileges to access my personal information, and at first, nothing happened. I was brushed off and was told the usual, "Oh, it's just a girl crush, she'll get over it," and, in a way, you should be flattered. After all, guys can't be the victim of sexual harassment, right? One more month goes by and I was actually promoted to Tier 2. Not really a promotion, they made me go, and I wasn't even getting paid more for the transition, even though it included much more responsibilities, such as mediation between hosts and guests involving their disputes. All four of us, Amy, Lily, and Susan, were all put on separate teams, thank God, but she would follow me to the drinking fountain and would just stand behind me, then go sit back down after I left. Wouldn't drink, just stand. 2 weeks later, I get called into HR's office. I breathe a sigh of relief and think this is finally over. I was wrong. I've been told that Susan has filed charges of sexual assault against me, saying I tried to rape her in the bathroom. I was dumbfounded. I asked them what proof they had, and they said they don't need any, and her word is good enough. After all, why would someone lie about something like that, right? I'd have every reason to try to hide something like that, while Susan is brave for coming forward. I tried to leave, but security stopped me at the door. I pushed past them and said, "I know for a fact that these rent-a-cops can't charge me for anything, so until that happens, I'll be at my desk." They let me go and I ran back to my desk, hoping that by blocking Susan on Hangouts the messages weren't deleted as well. Thank God they weren't. I had been taking screenshots of everything she had sent me over the past 3 months, and 2 police officers showed up about 10 minutes later. As they were putting handcuffs on me, I shouted at them, "My computer screen! Look at my computer screen!" All eyes were on me. The 250 people on the production floor had stopped talking. Most of them put their customers on hold so they could see what was going on. One of the police officers sat down at my desk and started looking over the messages. After what seemed like an eternity, he gets up and says, "Let him go." They bring Susan over and the same police officer looks her dead in the face and says, "I want the truth. Did this guy rape you?" She nodded her head and the police officer replied, "Really? So care to explain this message you sent 2 months ago, stating that you were going to say he raped you if he didn't let you come over to his house?" She started crying, tried to say it wasn't true and that I had been the one making sexual advances towards her, but she wasn't interested. Thank God the cop wasn't buying it. He said, "Young lady, we have all the evidence we need right here to disprove your claims. However, if you still insist that he raped you, we can investigate. Keep in mind that if it's found out that you were lying, you'll be in a lot more trouble than he is right now." She insisted that I raped her yesterday in the woman's bathroom, so I was officially arrested and brought in for questioning at the police station. They did a rape kit on her, and the cops asked for a DNA sample to compare it to the rape kit sample they took. I, of course, gave it to them and spent the next 2 days in jail. My family was notified, but I informed them that there was no point in spending the money on bail as I knew I was innocent. On the 3rd day, I was released. No charges were being filed against me as Susan admitted that she had made the whole thing up. I was asked if I wanted to press charges for the false accusation and try to get a defamation case against her. I declined and was happy that she had been fired and settled for a restraining order. My girlfriend ended up breaking up with me because of all this, saying that she could never trust me again even though I was found innocent. I guess, on the bright side, I was able to return the ring and put the funds towards a new car. My lease ended a few months later, and I moved across town, got a new job, and pray every day that I never see her again.
When I was a kid in the 90s, I used to seriously hate going to school. There would be at least one day a month where I would wake up and have it decided in my head that I was staying home. I'd do whatever it took, pretend to puke, glue myself to the toilet, cry, you name it, I'd do it. I'd do it because it worked. My parents were working class, all-day laborers, and couldn't afford to stay home or argue with me. By the time I was in 4th grade, 10 years old, they'd cave and just let me stay home alone, the days that I pretended to be sick. I remember one morning waking up and not having to fake it. My stomach was in knots, my throat was on fire, and I couldn't even keep my own spit down. Seemingly anything had me throwing up. Because of my habit of staying home, I was hell-bent on having some fun, even at the cost of a little discomfort. I lounged in the recliner, what I considered a gaming chair, and played some of my favorite video games. The bathroom upstairs was around the corner from my room, at the end of the hall. For no particular reason, this bathroom creeped me out from day one. I personally believe in ghosts and stuff like that as a kid. Again, for no real reason. I cooked up the idea that in my head, sometimes I saw things down there at the end of the hallway. The reality was there was a window way up high on the wall. It would cast odd shadows down at the base of the wall. I knew this, but liked to scare myself and my friends whenever they came over. Being home alone and needing to take a leak, I decided I would go downstairs to both use the bathroom and investigate our fridge. As I got up, I kind of sidestepped into the hallway, and of course saw something weird out of the side of my eye. It looked like a big looming man in the corner of the hall. Now this spooked me, and I booked it downstairs and waited. Nothing. I figured if it was a real person, I'd hear them walking. As you can imagine, I was alone. I go into the bathroom and do my business, and then head to the kitchen. The fridge was right beside our front door, so as I'm looking inside, I'm parallel to the front doorknob. I'm looking around and not finding anything that I can stomach, when I hear something weird. A jingling. I look over and exactly what I thought was happening. The front doorknob was wiggling back and forth. It's locked, thank God. My parents were security prone. The deadbolt was even locked, but still, I knew immediately that this was not anyone that lived here. We lived in a pretty good neighborhood, average sized suburb, but in my mind at the time, anything was possible. Beside the door is a big window, and something moves back and forth beyond the curtain. I watch in total horror as some skinny old guy leans over with his hands cupped to the glass and peers inside. His eyes go left, then right, and they fall on me, and this big, awful smile stretches across his face. He taps on the glass like I'm some animal at the zoo. I remember slamming the fridge closed so hard that I could hear everything shift around inside. For some reason, probably adrenaline, I thought that my mom was gonna kill me when she got home, and opened up the fridge and found the booby trap that I just made. I remember being more worried about that than the guy looking in the window. Again, I was like 10 or 11 when this happened, so I fancied myself a strapping young man in my head. I was also used to staying home alone, and had dealt with a lot of different people coming to our door. Electricity and water department workers, gas gauge checkers, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and any other number of people prone to knocking. I ran through a mental checklist as I looked this creep up and down. He definitely wasn't here to see my mom or dad. Definitely wasn't on the clock. He wasn't even knocking. I mean, if there's a red flag, this guy was firmly holding it in his hand. "Hey, why don't you come open up the door?" he said, pointing down to the handle. "I was just here yesterday." My head starts swimming. The hell is this guy talking about in here yesterday? Does he work for my dad? Does he know my older sister? I took a step forward because I was so caught off guard. He almost got me for a second. I was about to open up the door out of denial, hoping there was some sort of rational explanation. I caught myself after that first step, shook my head. No way, dude. He then shook his head too, and then kicked the house siding hard as hell, hard enough to make me jump. The whole kitchen was behind me, and the stairs off to the right of the room where the living room began. On the far side of the kitchen, there was a little hallway that led back to my parents' room, plus the laundry room, a bathroom, and then the side entrance for the garage. When I remember the garage, this entire plan springs into action in my head. To this day, I've never had a more clean, pragmatic line of thinking as I did that day. It kind of bums me out to tell you the truth. and I've been told it's because that's the only time my life has ever been on the line. Anyway, we kept a lot of things in the garage, like our camping and outdoor gear. This also included my cheap Walmart special paintball gun. It was one of those clear gray pump-action pistols. Took the CO2 cylinder in the bottom of the handle and slung a paintball hard enough to break a window. I know that from experience. I grabbed it, immediately changed the cylinder out of habit because I knew whatever the hell was in there had to be dead. I slammed a couple of handfuls of paintballs into the hopper. Good to go. I looked down though and saw something else that we kept in the garage. A splitting log, which had a hatchet sticking out of the top. I yanked it out and tucked it into my pajama pants. Crept back down the hallway. Now I can hear the guy messing with the door, so when I peek around the corner, he's no longer looking in the window. I bolt as fast as my sick little body would allow me, through the kitchen and then up the stairs. The landing led right into my bedroom, where I planned on barricading myself. I figured I'd shoot the guy if he came upstairs, and if that didn't deter him, I'd have to use the hatchet once he got inside. In my head it was foolproof, but something told me to stop. Something better occurred to me then. Instead of my room, I went around the corner and towards the creepy bathroom at the end of the hall. It felt crazy, but something told me this was the best plan. I stopped and went to the bathroom. I slid the window open as quietly as I could. I knew if I could fit through the opening. I knew the roof was easy to walk over from there. I'd snuck onto the roof a number of times this way, and I know if I crept around, I'd be able to see the front door. I pulled myself through, tiptoed along the roof, careful not to stand too tall or step too loudly. Honestly, the guy was an adult. He might be able to just climb right up the roof without a problem. I wanted to get the drop on this guy though. After a few steps, I came around and lo and behold, there he is, still working on the door. He's got a screwdriver, a credit card, a coat hanger, literally a kit the guys would have from Home Alone. It was cartoonish. The guy even had crazy hair and goofy clothes, like pants that were way too high. It was obvious this person was a stranger. In the moment, I wish I'd grabbed the telephone just to dial 911, and I realized that I had no idea what this guy was actually capable of. But he was desperate enough to get inside our house. It sounds crazy, but I swear it's the only thing that I could think of. I began shouting video game quotes at this, the toughest ones that I could remember from whatever games were out at the time. Obviously, I added a string of profanities, and when I first started shouting, the guy almost jumped out of his skin. Seeing him scared in just that brief moment opened up a whole new confidence in me. I started pelting him with paintballs. The chest, the hands, the face, the throat. I shot him everywhere, black and blue, literally. He was only 15 or 20 feet away, and I shot that thing every day at that point in my life. I could hit a dog turd at 50 paces. A full-grown man was an easy target. I'll never forget how he started screaming, like top of the lungs screaming. I think he thought I was shooting him for real, as those old single-pump paintball guns are loud as hell when they fired. Add that instant sting that he felt. He probably thought it was real for a second or two. Either way, he danced out of my sight. He composed himself, then started hollering threats of all kinds. He was saying them all in this deep, creepy voice that he didn't have before, when he was asking me to open up the house. I ran around to the other side of the roof, and by God, there he was, stalking around the opposite corner. I didn't even need to tell you that I let this guy up again, but this time he just booked it and jumped over the fence. He walked back to the little creek that separated some houses, rinsed the paint off of him, then wandered up the road. And you can believe I watched him for every step of that. Once he disappeared, I ran fast as hell inside, never dropping my weapons, and got a hold of our phone. I wanted to call the cops, but just opted to call my mom instead. She worked much closer and would be able to get home in at least a little bit quicker. I told her everything, and she called my dad. They both showed up not much later. I broke down at this point, as the reality set in that I was actually in danger. The story actually gets kind of crazier. The guy that was looking in the window, someone had been in our house the day before, and my parents were keyed into it because some stuff had been moved around the house. They noticed an open window in their bedroom. Some of the books were moved around, clothes moved too, and someone had a cigarette out in their bathroom sink. They knew it wasn't us kids. Obviously, neither of us smoked. They made sure to lock the doors, but other than that, they really didn't know what to make of it. It turns out that guy who peeked in our window had been casing houses up and down our neighborhood. 2 or 3 had already been robbed, and a 4th summer home, but over a dozen had been probed and valued, including ours. He would come up to a house, go through as much of their belongings as possible before being discovered, then come back the next day right when everyone was leaving and get what he wanted. He didn't account for me staying home that day, my parents locking everything up after having that first weird experience. I'm so glad that I live in the time that I do, as you can imagine. I have cameras everywhere now, security to the max, and a big .357 revolver instead of that paintball gun. All thanks to that childhood weirdo.
It was pretty quiet at the gas station, and it was around 10:15. There were no customers in the store, and my coworker and I were doing the usual cleaning chores. I was busy cleaning the large glass doors when my coworker said something to me. I turned to respond, and when I turned back to cleaning the glass door, I nearly wet myself as I see a tall man in a sweater, wearing a beanie, and the object that scared me the most, a black face mask. My mind begins racing as I reach for my keychain to lock the door, but the man was moving too fast and was inside before I could unclip the keys from my pants. The man looked at me, and in my mind I thought he was sizing me up. I readied myself for whatever this guy plans to do. My heart was racing a mile a second, and I almost thought that this was going to be it, that we were about to be robbed. That's when the man pulls his mask down and reveals his face. He asks if we had restrooms, and I gesture him towards the restrooms. As he walks away, he pulls his mask up again as he passes my coworker, who is quickly but quietly coming up to me. We both were shocked at what was going on, but both of us had hoped that this guy meant no harm. 5 minutes later, the guy comes back from the restroom, and he quickly leaves the store. After a little while, my heart stopped racing and things calmed down. That's when I made a realization I had seen a man who looked a lot like the masked man walking around the station and peering through the windows at the inside of the station. I don't know if they were the same person or not, but after thinking about it for a bit, I realized the guy may have been thinking about causing trouble, but when he saw my 6'8", 200-pound coworker walking towards him, he decided against it. I have to go back to close the station tonight. I will be carrying extra protective measures on my person, but I am hoping he doesn't return. Or if he does, he doesn't have that mask. Every gas station employee has that fear of a holdup, and last year a station in the same chain I work for in the same city was robbed, so the fear is especially real for me.
I'm an American citizen, but my family is from the South Asian country of Bengal. I loved spending time with my friends in the States, but I really enjoyed visiting my extended family back east. I worked at a business firm, and I handled a lot of information sciences there. It was a well-paying but tedious job. I rarely took breaks, but my manager was kind enough to let me get a couple weeks off of work every year. Those precious free weeks I had were taken up by a variety of activities. It was between going on vacation, chilling at home, or visiting my family back in Bangladesh. This year, the executives decided to give my branch a 1-week break over spring. But this break was going to be special. It had been more than 2 years since I'd last seen my greater family, and I really missed them. I instantly booked a ticket to Dhaka International Airport, packed my bags, and was en route the next day. When I arrived at the capital city, I swung by some old friends and we hung out a little. My old friends lived in the heart of the capital, but my family, on the other hand, well, they were in a not-so-urban area. While my parents moved to the large city when I was rather young, my grandparents, uncles, and aunts stayed in a small town northwest of the capital. The town was rural, but it was beautiful. It had a population of about 15,000 at the time, and it was a sparsely populated area. The town comprised of a set of homes, a school, a few shops, and mostly forest between them. It was a very remote region, and it didn't have all the facilities someone from a developed nation would consider normal. The electricity was unreliable, the tap water wasn't clean, and the internet cut out most often. But in my eyes, the lack of comfort was worth it. People were very nice and the community was tightly knit. I could consider almost anyone there family. So I hopped on a bus and headed over there. It was a long and bumpy ride, but I got there in one piece. After years, I was finally reunited with my family. The village was just as beautiful as it was. At the door, I was greeted by my sister, my cousin Bobble, my family dog, my mother, and my Aunt Tara. She happened to be visiting from a neighboring village. Now don't get me wrong, I love my family and it's always a blast seeing them. But my Aunt Tara was a bit odd, we'll say. Aunt Tara was a strong believer in superstitions and spiritual things. The things she'd say or try to make us do were extremely bizarre sometimes. She was seemingly a nice person, but was difficult to spend time with. She had a few quirks, if I can put it shortly. She would always tell us these terrifying ghost stories when we were kids, but most of the time, they weren't even for fun. She was serious. After catching up with my family, we quickly stepped inside and I unpacked my bags. But as I was unpacking, I felt a pair of eyes on me. It was my aunt. Sure, she was an oddball, but this was weird even for her. "Are you okay, Auntie?" I asked. She kept staring for a bit longer, but snapped out of it. "I'm fine," she said. "But the presence around us isn't," she continued. I was taken aback. I honestly thought she was done with this spiritual nonsense. "I sense a disturbance in the spirits among us. There are malicious souls and I sense them nearby," she continued. Okay, Auntie, I'll bear that in mind," I replied, trying to make the conversation a bit less awkward. "Be careful, and don't go out at night. Find a nearby shrine if you feel watched." She abruptly walked away. At this point, I was more annoyed than scared. I was honestly reluctant to even stay the night if she continued these antics. My thought was interrupted by my mom calling us out for dinner. Her food was delicious, so naturally I rushed over to the dining room. But as we were eating, my aunt was still acting strange. She had a sort of pendant necklace with a holy symbol on it. Every time we tried to include her in the conversation or asked her anything, she'd passively change the topic. She seemed very suspicious of something. We eventually just ignored her behavior and continued with our nights. But as I was about to sleep, my aunt knocked on my door. She told me once again to not step out at night, and that she was very worried for our safety. I couldn't believe it. She's still droning on about these spirits. I just shut the door and ignored her. I tried my best to go to sleep, but my jet lag was keeping me up. Bangladesh was about 13 hours ahead of the US West Coast, and my body clock was completely flipped. I tried watching some videos on my phone in hopes of passing time, but the internet eventually cut out, and it was just me alone in a dark room. I thought about going out on a night walk, but then remembered what my aunt said. I didn't believe in that stuff, but part of me was telling me that it may actually be a bad idea going out at this hour. But my boredom was getting to me, and I said hell with it. My dog awoke to the sound of me stepping outside and started acting up. At first I thought he was just cranky and tired, but he seemed to growl at me as I got closer to the door. That was odd. I ventured out anyways. As I stepped out, I felt the crisp air hit my skin. The village didn't have many streetlights, and it was all engulfed in forest. There was a trail over to the side of the street my house was on, and I proceeded through there. At first, nothing unusual seemed to be occurring. The sound of the crickets roared as I walked through the wilderness on a dirt path. But as I was walking, I felt watched. I tried to shrug it off as my aunt getting to me, but I almost felt a chill going up my spine. I kept hearing a loud voice coming from a distance behind me. It seemed to be an owl. But as the hooting of the owl got closer and closer, there seemed to be something seriously wrong with it. The owl hoots were almost human. The sounds the owl made kept switching back and forth from an actual owl to what seemed to be a person impersonating one. The hooting got louder and louder, but I never noticed an owl in sight. I surveyed my surroundings and saw a misty black figure in the shadows. It quickly vanished behind a tree. I kept scanning up and down the trees to find out what was around me, and I noticed the silhouette of an owl in a tree, but as I blinked, it disappeared again. What was happening? Was it my eyes still adjusting to the dark? Maybe my jet lag was getting to me. The hooting suddenly stopped, and the forest was dead silent. My breath sounded like a roar. I slowly looked over my shoulder only to see it. In the darkness, I made out an owl sitting in a tree. The owl somehow morphed itself into a shadowy humanoid ghost form. I couldn't believe my eyes. I didn't want to believe my eyes. The misty creature slowly morphed around and started shifting from tree to tree, getting closer to me. At this point, I sprinted. I sprinted as hard as I could, adrenaline rushing through every ounce of my body. I heard the hooting start again behind me, this time like it was angry. I kept sprinting out of the woods. I ran. I looked towards my parents' house. I couldn't think of anywhere else I could hide. When I got to my house, before I could even say anything, my aunt was waiting by the front door. She dragged me in. The creature was still following me. I could hear voices at the edge of the forest where my house was. My aunt quickly took me over to our house's shrine and kept me there between a few idols. I waited and waited, confused and terrified. Eventually, the sun rose. I somehow mustered the strength to step out of the prayer room. My aunt was waiting outside the door. I explained to her everything that happened. The owl, the noises, the weird misty figure, and how it somehow chased me home. She explained to me that I was very lucky to be alive, and that I'd encountered something called a penchapechis. Penchapechis are a form of unsatisfied or malicious spirits that haunt the forests of Bengal. They take the form of owls and follow travelers in the woods until they're alone and cornered. The ghost would then consume its prey like a zombie and continue to its next victim. She said that she felt the presence of many angry or ill-intended spirits in the area. She felt a rise in these ghosts were most likely due to the flood in a neighboring region that killed many people. The spirits of those people did not feel satisfied with their lives. Most of them died far too young and continued to live in the afterlife as ghosts. That story occurred about a year back, and I haven't gone back since. But if I do, I will definitely listen to my aunt.
Almost 20 years ago now, I used to work the overnight shift at an animal shelter. I know that's a long time ago, but something happened one night that is burned into my memory. I can recall the whole thing like it was yesterday. The textures, the smells. It's something I've carried with me for nearly 2 decades. My shifts were from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, a solid 8 hours of sleeplessness that grounded me down over the course of my time there. Night shifts can be good if you need the money, even better if you're antisocial, but the lifestyle grinds you down. Put it this way, I had a full vitamin D deficiency after just 6 months of working there. It's not a healthy way to live. The animal shelter itself was actually a pretty big place. A horseshoe-shaped building complete with a waiting area, a series of offices, medical examination room, and, of course, hundreds and hundreds of kennels and cages. Aside from once a week when the overnight cleaning staff were there, I spent all of my shifts alone behind the shelter's reception desk that gave me a direct line of sight to the security glass of the shelter's front doors. My only duties were to monitor the emergency phone line, check on the animals now and then, and do some basic filing. I'd pack a few snacks and sandwiches for when I got hungry mid-shift, and every so often I'd call up the 24-hour pizza joint just a few miles away and get them to deliver a box of hot, cheesy joy to push me through the night. Sure, the hours sucked, but working at the animal shelter gave me a great deal of freedom, and it paid really well. I mean, way better than any other night porter jobs I'd seen advertised. It was quite a happy time in my life, which I suppose is why I remember this story so well. It was such an odd event in an otherwise joyful time in my life. Anyway, on the rare occasion that someone came in, it was to drop off a stray animal that they had found or one they no longer could care for. The shelter was always happy to take them in and make them as comfortable as possible. It was kind of nice being the first point of contact to a lot of these animals. A lot of them were nervous or scared, and calming them down with treats and petting was more fulfilling than words can describe. I made a lot of furry friends during my employment at the shelter. I should add that the only exception to the shelter's rescue policy applied to fighting dogs or feral cats. As heartbreaking as it is, dogs that have been trained and conditioned to fight other animals are more often than not hopeless cases. Even if they're sweet and well-behaved around humans, if other animals or even small children aren't safe around them, they've no hope of adoption. Most tend to be euthanized, which is something so sad I can't even bring myself to write about it. But even as hard as these cases are, what happened this one particular night was so much worse. It was just past 3 in the morning when I finished a cigarette outside and was returning to my desk. It was one of those quiet fall nights where the silence seems to hang heavy in the air, so I heard the sound of footsteps coming from quite a ways away. There was a woman sprinting full pelt down the sidewalk towards the front entrance of the shelter, banging on the glass and buzzing the intercom over and over as she reached the doors. As I moved to greet her, I noticed that her cheeks glistened with fresh tears. Something terrible was obviously happening. I hurried to unlock the glass door, trying to remain calm as I asked her how I could help. She didn't answer the question at first, which is really unusual. Normally, that's the first thing out of a person's mouth. They've got 1,000 questions about adoption, what shots an animal might need, etc. All she asked was if she could come inside. She didn't have an animal with her, so I was beginning to get a little suspicious as to why she was there. But nevertheless, I'm not one to turn away an upset person, so I invited her inside, gave her some tissues to dry her cheeks, and proceeded to try to get more info out of her. When she calms down, she begins to tell me that she needs to get her cat back. This was a problem since I wasn't authorized to return any interred animals without the proper signatures and paperwork, all of which was in the locked office of one of the resident veterinarians. There was absolutely no way I'd be able to return her animal, especially not in the middle of the night. She'd have to return during regular hours to talk to one of the vets. It's when I tried to explain this to her that things started to go downhill. To my absolute horror, she goes on to explain that she actually came in earlier that day to have her cat put down. She had returned to claim the body in order to give her precious kitty a proper burial. Seriously, those were her exact words. She's still in tears at this point, and she's getting gradually more upset again the more she's talking about her dead cat. I just wanted to get her out of here. She didn't seem it at first, but the more I was around her, the more I gathered that she wasn't exactly all there, if that makes sense. So, like a fool, I took a brief description and went looking for her dead cat. The shelter keeps the bodies of euthanized animals in large blue plastic drums. You know the type. The kind that chemicals are kept in the black plastic lids. These blue drums are in turn kept in a huge walk-in freezer located in the shelter's basement. I gained access to the room in question, opened the freezer, and began to look for whichever barrel had been sealed the previous day. Finding it was the easiest part of the whole process. As I pulled off the black plastic lid, the smell hit me. Even when they're frozen, the animals still gave off this faint, sickly smell of decay. Throw a load of them into the same plastic drum, and, well, the stink gets intense. I had to sift through scores of twisted, frozen corpses, laying them down on the cold metal floor of the walk-in and studying them in order to find the one that matched the woman's scant description. Eventually, I did find the cat that seemed to match the description I was given. But there was one thing. The cat was frozen solid and was actually stuck to another dead cat. I tried pulling them apart with my bare hands, but it was no good. I'd need something else for leverage, so I put the frozen mess of bodies on the freezer floor, put one foot on one of the cats, then proceeded to peel them from one another with a horrific snapping sound. I nearly puked when I'd seen what I'd done. A huge portion of the cat's frozen flesh had been torn away and was still stuck to its frozen partner. Keeping hold of one that was the crying woman's, I threw the other back into the plastic drum, found an opaque plastic bag, then returned it to its former owner. She seemed happy enough and actually tried to hug me as she was leaving, but I really didn't feel like it was worth it. The whole thing left a very bad taste in my mouth. I had no idea what she was going to do with that dead cat, even if she did reassure me that she was just going to bury it. Sometimes, even to this day, I wonder, whatever happened to that woman?
So, about 4 years ago, my parents were going out, and with that, I was going to be home all alone for at least 3 to 4 hours. They left around 6, and they said they would be home around 9 to 12. Whenever they left, I went downstairs. I got some snacks and I had put on Netflix to then look around for a new show. After like 2 hours of watching a new show, that's when I then heard a very strange noise coming from the front porch. Keep in mind, I have a wraparound porch and there were a lot of windows looking out. Me being curious, I pulled back the curtains and then looked out into the dark yard. After looking around, nothing seemed off, until I saw a black silhouette of a man standing by the front door. I froze in fear, dropping the curtains, and then ran upstairs into my parents' room. After 5 minutes of waiting, I decided to text my parents. I told them the incident, and surprise, surprise, they didn't believe me, given that I was only 13. I sat there and I thought maybe it was my imagination. I decided to walk back downstairs and finish my show. I realized the motion sensor light in the backyard was now on. You can either turn the light on, or if anyone walks by it, it will turn on automatically. Keep in mind that this light isn't very sensitive. Most time it turns on whenever a person or animal walks by it. Once I realized what was going on, I ran back to my parents' room, once again in tears. I picked up the house phone to call the police, when I then heard a whisper from outside my window. "Hey, I know you're in there. Just come out. Come out here real quick. I just want to talk to you." My heart dropped and was about to beat right out of my chest. I froze in fear, then snapped back and called the police. The 911 operator told me to hide in a closet and to stay quiet. She told me to stay on the line just in case anything else happens. Also, keep in mind that my house is around 15 minutes away from the nearest town. After sitting in my parents' closet, I heard the back door creak. Tears started rolling, as I then heard someone walking around in the kitchen and living room. I told the 911 operator what was happening, and then I heard something fall over downstairs. Then I heard the stairs creaking, and a man walking around the bedrooms. Thank God I locked the bedroom door, because he saw it was locked, and just kept going. Or so I thought. Well, after around 30 seconds, I heard the loudest bang of my life, and with a man screaming. And like a miracle, right after this, I then heard police sirens, and the man running away, and then the back door slamming shut. I ran out, and I saw him running into the woods. I ran outside, and I told the cops everything. And then they took me to my aunt's house, where I waited at for my parents to come home. Ever since this happened, they never did find the man, considering we never really got any details on him. I pray and hope he never returns.